the water cooler, everybody. This has been a hot show. I mean hot. Yeah, it's hot in the studio, but I'll tell you what, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Witzke, they're bringing it, as they say in basketball, strong to the rack. And our next guest, who we're going to get to in a moment, tell you what, biblically, he was bringing it strong on the House floor the other day. He was starting to read the Bible on the House floor. Why? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because of the Equality Act and the fact that there are just two genders, according to the Bible. Here's some of that. Listen to this.
Like most speeches you'll hear on this floor today, I'm going to start with the truth. Deuteronomy 22:5 states, "A woman must not wear men's clothing, nor a man wear women's clothing, for the Lord your God detests anyone who does this." Now, this verse isn't concerned about clothing styles, but with people determining their own sexual identities. It's not clothing or personal style that offends God, but rather the use of one's appearance to act out or take on a sexual identity different from the one biologically assigned by God at birth. In his wisdom,
Greg Steube goes on, that's Congressman Greg Steube from Florida, goes on to talk about the issue and, of course, the biblical wisdom behind it. Then that got Gerald Nadler, one of the top House Democrats, in a tizzy, T-I-Z-Z-Y, I think that's how you spell it. This is what Jerry Nadler.
Mr. Steube, what any religious tradition ascribes as God's will is no concern of this Congress.
Okay, hold on. God's will is no concern of this Congress? Has he checked the founding documents? All right, I don't want to get into this. Well, actually, I do, because I want to bring in Congressman Greg Steube from Florida. Congressman, great to have you here on the water cooler. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, I don't know. Why don't you give us your take as to your reason to do that in the first place, to read from Scripture, and then, of course, what your reaction was when you saw Gerald Nadler come out and talk about God's will has no place in Congress.
Well, it was definitely spirit-driven. The day before, I was reading the Bible, and it just so happens that I was on Deuteronomy 22:5. That's where I had left off a couple of days before, and not knowing it, I was reading Tony Evans's commentary Bible, and that's exactly where I had left off. And it was day before the debate on the House floor, and I thought, okay, well, I certainly can't let that go. That is direct, on point. The way that Tony Evans described it, I thought was very appropriate. And so I used that and went from there. And obviously that got a confession from Mr. Nadler that it's certainly the Democrats' will that God not be included and biblical truths not be included in the things that they're doing in this democratically led Congress. And I thought it was ironic because as he said that, I looked up, and unfortunately under the rules, I don't have the opportunity to go back and forth with him or respond to what he said. But right above the speaker's rostrum, the only words that are written on the House floor is "In God we trust." Mm-hmm. So I think it's interesting that Mr. Nadler would say that that has no place in this Congress, that God's will has no place in this Congress, when right above where the speaker is standing, it says, "In God we trust."
Yeah, we want to give you an opportunity here. Pretend this is the U.S. House floor. What would your reaction have been to Gerald Nadler if you had a chance to respond? Obviously, you talked about "In God we trust," but what does it say about Democrats overall about they're moving away from God? The polls show this. The people that are following the Democratic Party typically are there from a church-going perspective. What's your message to Gerald Nadler on all of this?
Well, I would contend that it very much, if we're not on the shoulders of God, as it talks about in Scripture, then we're on the shoulders of somebody else that I don't care to be on the shoulders of. And we're going a direction in this country that is very clearly not the direction of God. And if we're not going the direction of God, then we're going in the direction of the evil one. And the type of things that are described in the bill that we were debating on that floor is very much confusing the gender identities that we have in this country, confusing gender as it is. They redefined what gender is. They redefine what a man is. They redefine what a woman is. It no longer is what you were deemed at biologically when you were born. It is now what you have identity of, and you can feel as a woman in the morning and feel as a man in the afternoon, and our government's going to recognize whatever identity that you feel at that given time. And that's just not the direction that I believe the majority of Americans think we should be going. Think about this. If this bill were to pass and be signed by President Biden, which he's already said he would sign, that means we are going to have biological men who, quote unquote, identify as women playing in women's sports. We're not only going to have them playing on the soccer field with women and children and young girls in middle school, they're also going to be able to go into their locker rooms. They're going to be able to go into their showers and partake in everything that
Yeah.
women's and girls are partaking in athletics.
Well, and even if you don't want to argue the morality of it, obviously there's a huge moral issue here. But even if you're a Democrat and you don't want to argue the morality, how about just the political stupidity? I mean, how in the world do they think this is going to attract suburban moms who have kids in school who want to see their daughter maybe get a scholarship to college? And I mean, it just seems like it's politically stupid as well, not to mention morally. There's issues morally with it. Now, you have reintroduced a bill, right, to protect women and girls in competitive sports. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it would protect Title IX sports. So I filed it last year. Of course, the Democratic-led Congress didn't want to take it on. But given what the Biden administration did on equality as it relates to female and women's sports, I felt it necessary to file the bill again. It would protect Title IX and women's sports. Therefore, only biological women can compete against biological women in women's sports. Otherwise, the colleges would lose their Title IX funding. And like you said, I can't see how even Democratic mothers who young girls are competing in either middle school or high school, and their high school daughter is competing for a scholarship to go to a university, and now they're having to compete with biological men to get that soccer scholarship. And now they're getting beaten out for those scholarships. I can't even see that Democratic and independent women would think that that's a great situation for their daughters to have biological men in the showers and the locker rooms and competing with them for athletic scholarships.
Yeah, it's head scratching for sure. I've got 30 seconds less, or 30 seconds or less. This gender council that Biden wants to do here, they're going to look at Title IX. Who knows what they're going to end up doing here?
Well, they're going to give Title IX a completely new definition that is whoever wants to identify as that gender on that day can. And it completely undercuts, in my opinion, it undercuts all of the gains that we have had for women's sports and women equality since 1972 as it relates to Title IX sports. We're going to go completely the opposite direction because if biological men can compete in women's sports, it's not women's sports anymore.
There you go. Greg Steube, I believe this is, if you had a mic, you would be like, boom, I'm out. Greg Steube dropping the mic. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you.
Really
Great to see you.
All right.